Welcome, folks, to the first episode of Bad Company, the podcast by AmericanArmsChannel here. I'm your host, Drake. Joining me today is a very special guest for the first episode, and that's going to be my father. We'll just refer to him as Dad, his first Mark, and we'll leave it at that. We'll have him introduce himself here in just a second. But today's podcast, as you can probably tell from the introduction, is about Boss Shotshells. We really wanted to take the time today and unpack a lot of the information that's floating out there about steel versus bismuth, specifically Boss's copper-plated bismuth, and see, if we can provide some information to you that will help you decide whether or not it's for you, talk about what it has compared to other mediums. And with that, I guess we'll get right into it. So, Dad, why don't you introduce yourself and let people know maybe what kind of hunting and shooting background you have when it comes to birds and the likes.
As far as, my hunting experience, I'm 55 years old, so my experience with hunting goes back a good 40-some-odd years. Grew up in a rural situation, small farm, small town. Spent a lot of my childhood in the fields and streams and woods and swamps, ranging out around my home. And, a lot of small game, big game, pretty much anything, pursuing anything, that was my thing, trapping, hunting.
Right, so becoming a natural shot was just part of your childhood and...
Well, of course, it started with a BB gun at about 6 or 7 years old, and after shooting about 1,000 pounds of BBs, progressed to 22s and shotguns, ammunition was precious. The idea was to make every shot count all the time. So developing your hunting skills and particularly your shooting skills was important. I grew up hearing stories about men that, hunted all through the Great Depression with one box of shells. That's all they had to hunt and feed their family with, and so that was impressed upon me. And so, that one shot, one kill was a very important concept.
Would you say that extended on to bird hunting, where even though you're shooting at moving targets a lot of the time, was it common for you to take that expensive, precious ammunition and fire multiple rounds, or was it kind of like if I didn't hit it the first time, I just sort of let it go?
Well, I didn't grow up poverty-stricken. The shells, I had enough money that, every shell wasn't critical, but I still had the mindset that it was, being a good sportsman, you don't want to wound game. I'm not here to hurt it, I'm here to kill it. You were careful. You target practice, you took that seriously, and you try to improve your skills, dry firing. We said a lot of practice with air rifles and stuff, where you were able to, shoot a little more, a lot more bang for the buck.
Right.
So, that's just kind of the background. You just wanted to be skillful, and you wanted to be known as that guy that could hit what he was shooting.
All right, especially in the days of 2 3/4-inch number 6 lead and pumpkin balls for deer and
I grew up in the Foster Slug era. Pumpkin balls were just a wee bit before my time, but everybody I knew had used them. My uncles and my father and that. But that was just after my era, so that's why I have experience with lead, for waterfowling, because my experience goes back 40 years.
Right. So let's say it's 1979, and it's late October down behind the farm, and your favorite wood duck hole, and you've got let's see, I guess it would be the 16 gauge Model 12. What's your did you have a load of choice, or was it just what was on hand?
No, it was just hey, you went to your local sporting goods store and you bought your Remchester whatever. It was high brass number 6s, little pheasant and duck on the side of the box, and that was it. That was what you had. I think the stuff was probably 3.5 dram equivalent. It was high brass, but it wasn't, punishing at all. Ounce and a quarter. Well, it wouldn't be ounce and a quarter with 16. That would be the 12, but probably 1 ounce with 16 gauge.
Right. So 1.1 ounce probably, the old Model 12, and the modified choke too. So I mean, of course, we're talking about a honey hole down in the swamp and jump shooting birds, if I recall.
My yards.
Right. So did you ever have a disparity with late season birds? Like, was it more common for you to run a smaller shot size, or did you in early season compared to late, or did you just carry the 6s through the season? Right.
So you pretty much what was locally available was 6s and 4s. So if you really you wanted to reach out a little bit, you'd go a size higher with the 4-shot. That was about all that was common. At least in my area, you couldn't find 5s.
Right. So that's a pretty good background there, Dad, of giving an explanation of where you grew up as far as hunting and shooting goes, and as far as what kind of your shot selection was for ducks, as well as your ammo. I mean, that gives us a really good basis to understand your anecdotal experience as far as lead goes. So I guess before we get into discussing steel versus bismuth here and start putting a bunch of numbers on the table as far as the way the two compare, let's talk about the late 80s coming into 1993, and then the complete ban on toxic shot in 1994, the year I was born. What was that for you? What did you see? Because I know by that time you had transitioned to a 12 gauge. I know you were used to, the same shot
I started
sizes.
probably about I started to use a 12 gauge double around 1989, 1988, 89, somewhere in that range. And it was just an old Stevens double, but now I had a modified and a full barrel, so I was able to squeeze a little bit more range out of that, the lead shot. And with dual triggers, so the rear trigger was a modified, and the front trigger was the full, so that that full choke barrel got me a little bit, enabled me to reach out a little bit farther and get those doubles and stuff on those birds out upwards of 40 yards.
Right. So when we're looking at, okay, we're still using number 6, number 4 lead. We've now got, your personal setup is really agreeing with you. You're able to take those passing shots, those decoying, or well, for you, I guess more so just dropping into the local honey hole kind of shots with wood ducks and mallards. So 1990,
or even stalking through swamps and jump shooting birds.
Right.
Which was a lot of fun.
Right.
You had large swamps that were full of ducks, mallards, and woodies predominantly, and you could sneak around pretty successfully and jump shoot ducks.
Right. Which is, really how I grew up. The first duck hunting, and about 12 or 13 when I started, you pretty much told me how to do it, and I I put my deer hunting
when I was
skills
young,
at work.
I had a few decoys that Uncle Ed had given me that I used, you know. But predominantly, that was, the way I hunted. I just go to a hunting hole, throw out a few decoys. I don't even remember calling until they were, that thick that really just didn't have that much effort with it.
Yeah, right. So, you've had a really good time growing up. Obviously you folks as a deer hunter, but the ducks were a target of opportunity when the season allowed. And, we're basically with everything's hunky-dory, and we get to 1994 with the toxic shot ban, and you've got to immediately transition to steel. How did that go for you? What did you see?
Well, I just, of course I went up to number 2 shot with a steel. And for a lot of my, the close hunting that I did, it was okay. I noticed there was a little bit more, finding ducks that instead of stopping them and cartwheeling them, a lot of times I had to finish them. I wasn't too happy with that because it wasn't what I was used to. And like I said, I having respect for game animals, you don't want to hurt them. You'd like to, have a good, clean kill. And I noticed there was a lot more cripples, a lot more ducks. When I got to them, they were kicking. And it seemed to be effective enough, but, you didn't have any choice. That was it. Steel was it. And I wasn't. You tried to work within the limitations of it, and I noticed that at the longer ranges, I lost at least 5 yards. There came a time when there was shots that I just wouldn't even try with the steel. So it became critical that they be close in, and you do your job right, and it was adequate, but I wasn't, I was never really satisfied with it because after having used lead, you knew there was a better solution there.
Right. So what did you see? So obviously starting out, the steel shot was being pushed at identical velocities to its lead counterpart.
Pretty much. It was, somewhere around the 1,300 feet per second initially. You just went up, you went up shot sizes to get the effectiveness. Of course, you lost pattern density, so you weren't getting as many hits. But, the hits you did get seemed to do the job. But once again, on the outer, fringes of what you considered your shootable range, you lost. So there was some detrimental effects of the steel. I just always felt that it was a handicap.
Right. So, there's also this thing that happened too as we progressed through the 90s and into the 2000s. Everybody starts shooting 3 inches. And you didn't really have a 3-inch gun ever.
No.
So you were stuck in 2 3/4 territory. So in order to get the faster, quote unquote, more effective steel loads, all of a sudden you're shooting 1 1/1 ounce and 1/8. Did you see any improvement as far as game dispatching, or was it the same old, same old?
It was pretty much the same. I mean, you just, I had a 3-inch barrel, a modified barrel with a pump shotgun that I used, and I could use 3 inches in it, and I didn't notice any effectiveness increase with it, with the 3-inch shells, and you were throwing more shot out there, but your patterns didn't seem to hold together any better. You seemed like you were just punishing
diminishing returns
more than anything else. Yeah, it was diminishing returns. You're throwing it faster and faster, and you're feeling the effects of that on your shoulder and smacking you in the side of the face. But as far as effectiveness on the game, it was small gains.
Right. So, you're doing this. Do you think that the steel shot transition hurt the commonness of you going duck hunting, or did that have any effect on you?
Not for me, because I wasn't that wasn't I wasn't what you would call a avid waterfowler. It was something I did, but it was limited. I'd go out probably a half a dozen times a year. It wasn't a huge deal. I mean, but I kind of miss those days when I was more effective with that limited amount of hunting. Because with work and responsibilities and stuff, I wasn't able to pursue the waterfowl all that great. It was more a local thing, like you say, the honey holes and my opportunities weren't that great that I wanted to make them count more like they did before.
Right. So, I'll say this. So I was born in 1994. So I come into this. I've never known lead other than for rabbits and stuff. So on birds, I have no clue, as far as waterfowl goes, what lead does. So back in 2008 or 9, when I start duck hunting, steel's all I know. And I start out with your old loads, and you give me 2 3/4 inch ounce and a quarter of, doesn't even have a velocity on it. It's just Federal and Remington nitro steel.
I think it was Federal. It was probably 1330 of number 2s.
Right. Right. So
4 gram equivalent or whatever they want to call it, but I think the velocity was somewhere a little over 1,300 feet per second.
Right. So I've got this J.C. Higgins Model 20, which is a high standard Model 200, practically brand new, made 40 years before I was even born. And that's in my hands, right? And you hand me this box, and you're like, go have at it, because New York has this new special September goose season. So I go down back, and after several failed shootings, because I'm not a wing shooter, you raised me to be a rifleman primarily, and I'm a deer guy, right? So I go down there and kill my first goose, and that starts it all. And from that point up until just the last year or two, steel has been the only thing I had ever known. So looking at that, it's like, well, eventually you're like, okay, for somebody like me, I start trying all the different stuff. Eventually I end up with, in the last few years, a Super Magnum. I'm running a 3.5 inch, ounce and 3/8 or ounce and a half at blistering speeds, 1500, 1515, 1625 FPS with number 2s, 3s, 4s, BB, 1s. I mean, I've tried everything.
Velocity stuff.
Right. So I'm shooting everything from number 5 all the way up to T-shot. I'm trying all sorts of different stuff, all different lengths, loads, velocities, etc. And what I'm finding is I never land on one that I'm happy with for long, because I find shots, I'm like, damn it, this pellet was super effective, but there's only, let's say an ounce and a quarter of number 1s. There's only 27 of the damn things, or 47 of the damn things in a 3-inch ounce and a quarter shell.
Yeah.
It's
I'll take your word for it. I'm not sure what the count is on that.
Right. So my point is, okay, the better performance, the larger shot I have to go. Okay, so I get less pellets. What does it mean? I got to increase my charge. Well, now I've got to increase my shell length. So now, in order to get what I want, now I'm all of a sudden I'm shooting a super duper 3.5 inch crazy Magnum at 1,500 feet per second or more, and it's an ounce and a half a shot just to get the pellet count of the shot size that I want. And we're forgetting that I'm still shooting a 12 gauge, so the bore diameter is not optimal for that pellet size. So yeah, BB works really great.
Your shot column's getting long.
Yeah, but you know what? BB works great. Steel BB works great in a 10 gauge, ounce and 3/4 at like 1,300 feet per second. Why? Because it literally pummels a goose to pieces at 50 yards.
I think it has to do with the pattern. You're just getting a better pattern. You're getting pattern density with it. It's a more squared off load than you're getting long. When you start 3.5 inch 12 gauge, that shot count starts growing. You're not getting a more effective pattern. I don't know why, but it just doesn't seem to work in the real world.
Right. Well, it's the ass end of that shot column doesn't catch up to the middle or front part of it, so it's all hitting at different times. So
yeah, it seems like it's, especially if you're swinging it. I don't know what the physics is, but it just doesn't seem to quite add up.
Right. Right. So, I mean, the point being, I've been there and done that. And so I start exploring, right? And I'm always telling you about my new adventures and stuff. And I start looking at, okay, there's Bismuth has been on the market. And I talked to you about it. And we were talking about it, looking at it. It's like, Bismuth in the past, Bismuth came out in the late 90s. I mean, people started loading Bismuth almost as soon as they banned lead. And it was this great wonder, this Wunda material, this wonder material that we're like, it's soft like lead and it's safe on old guns and this, that, and the other thing, but it's brittle. So they found that it would break apart.
Don't seem to have the roundness of the BBs. They don't seem to be there.
Right.
And you open one of those up and there was like teardrop-shaped pellets in there.
So now we go forward and we go, okay, so now there's tungsten. Well, tungsten used to be kind of cheap. And tungsten matrix, tungsten polymer, tungsten iron, all were bouncing, around like, okay, these are good. They work really well. And all of a sudden, tungsten shot went from being a little bit more per round than the steel shot at the time to being an excessively high price point. And it still is. I mean, if you're looking at pure tungsten like TSS, I mean, you're looking at $1.95 to $3 a shot. Granted, most of these are turkey loads, but even when you look at things like, for example, Heavy Shots Heavy X, which doesn't have as high a density as lead because it's a tungsten iron matrix, it works really well. But what I found is just like what you said about early bismuth, the pellets aren't round. They have erratic flight. They don't pattern well out of most guns, and I've had mixed results. I've had birds I've stoned dead at 60 yards with it, but I've also had birds I've shot knowing I had a good hit as far as, it was sent. Like, there was no way I missed that bird. It was in the pattern, but the pattern was so shitty, it only got a couple pellets, and it goes 40 yards and falls out of the sky, or it goes 200 yards and falls out of the sky.
Yeah, the effects were there, but the pattern is the problem.
Right. So now it's like, well, how do you fix this? Well, fast forward to this past year, and I start hearing more and more and more about this Boss Shotshell company. And I'm like, okay, it sounds great, but, we've heard all the marketing ploys before, especially when it comes to waterfowling. You watch any sort of hunting show, and it's nothing but an infomercial practically with a few birds shot here and there. And you're like, it's not that good. I've tried that stuff. I've tried the heavy metal. I've tried the hypersonic steel. I've tried I've given it all a shake, and none of it tasted right. Right? It all came out wanting more. It
all left me wanting a little bit more.
So
a little bit shy of the advertising.
Yeah. So then I find out they're copper plating this shot. And that makes me think, that's different. And I told you about it, and you kind of did the same. It was kind of the same thing. We both kind of went, that's different. Who's copper plating shot anymore, unless it's like a turkey load or a high end pheasant load, and once again, that's lead. Nobody's doing anything with a non-toxic and copper plating it. That's kind of odd. Well, what's that going to do? So we start looking into it, and finally I commit to getting some. And I put it on birds right away in West Virginia. And I'm like, well, this stuff's hitting hard. I get home and I clean out the birds. I'm going, hey, this stuff's leaving trauma I've never seen with steel before. Hell, I haven't seen this quite with tungsten because the pattern was never dense enough at distance. So we fast forward to October 19th in Western Zone of New York, which is season opener for ducks. And, right away, both of us take a couple birds in the honey hole. And, granted, our shots aren't super far. Steel would have done the job. But, I was talking about how impressed I was. And then you got to take a couple of birds. And then you got to witness me take a true double, a true pair on two big greenheads. And, other than the few expletives we announced when we saw that unfold before our eyes, you commented that was pretty freaking rude because I fluffed the first one like a down pillow, and the second one was, he kicked on the water, but he was hammered dead. He was just flinching after
the
that.
80s were pretty good to me, so it seems like a solid comment.
Right. And for those of you who don't know, the Bad Company waterfowl thing is kind of based off of that idea that it's kind of a tongue in cheek that when you're waterfowl hunting, you're in bad company, right? It's really good. You're with good folk. You're having a good time, and it's a grand experience for all, except for the birds. So it's bad company for them. So that's kind of a little thing behind that. So if you hear us say ever on a video that was rude, that's kind of where that comes from. That's an 80s thing. So maybe guys your age, Dad, if they watch the video or listen to the podcast, they might appreciate that. But okay, so all of that anecdotal background, we're of course going to probably chop this a little bit to make it fit in a condensed space where guys will be able to listen to it and consume it. So we might chop some stuff out that might not be quite as pertinent to the conversation, but here's where we're going to get into the numbers like I was talking about. So we've had this anecdotal evidence between the two of us. I've always shot steel until now. You had always shot lead until steel was a requirement and never had seen it. We were both pretty impressed.
I had a good solid 10 years, 20 to 20 years with lead before I had to go over to steel.
Right. So you're looking at this, and I put this new ammo in your hands. I'm like, Dad, try this. And another special thing is we found you a Belgian A5 Magnum made the same month and year you were born, which was it had to have been divine providence there. So you've got a classic gun. You've got ammo that I'm swearing up and down is the tits, and you shoot your first bird with it. We kill more birds over the weekend, and then looking at the
first shot in anger out of the gun, first time I fired. And
right, you just flatlined a bird, and it was a great shot. It felt good. It wasn't that close too. It was like 25, 30 yards. It wasn't.
Yeah, I let him. He came in and decoyed, and then I let him get up off the birds and fly a little bit. I had a full choke. I didn't want to.
Right.
He was decoyed at like 15 yards.
Full choke and a 32-inch barrel. I mean, you probably could have smashed him if you got any closer when he decoyed.
So I had to let him get out a little ways.
But and we're running 2 3/4-inch number 4 of this Boss Shotshell stuff.
Right.
When you shot it, I mean, I asked you. I said, "What do you think?" And you were like, "That was nice. That was super soft." Because compared to steel beat the hell out of you if you let it, because it doesn't have any.
That's a heavy gun, so it softens it a little. But I mean, that was like nothing. It was like, wow, that was nice.
Right. So we take a look at the birds, and at the end of the week, and I ask you what you think, and what is it you told me about this before we get into the numbers?
It's from. Like I said, from the few days that we hunted and the birds that we took and the shots that were presented and the damage that was done, the terminal effects, it's the closest thing to lead that I've seen. I mean, it may not be exact, but it's pretty damn close. Like I said, I was shooting. Lead was soft shooting. I mean, you didn't beat yourself up with it. These rounds weren't hopped up, and it seems like the same thing with the Boss. Relatively mild shooting, but extremely effective on target. The patterns must be really good.
Right. And I must say it colored you impressed enough that for, you threw $100 down after some ammo I gave you for the rest of the season and said, get me a half a case. Yep. And so now, of course, with the amount of hunting you do, you've got enough ammo to probably last you the next 3 seasons.
Yeah,
for birds.
I just don't throw a lot of shots out there, but the ones that I do, I want them to count, and so this is encouraging. I like this ammo. Right.
So we've talked about now what we saw, what we've experienced, our impressions of it, and obviously, if it hasn't been obvious to you yet, my father and I are on the Boss train. We're pretty well committed to it. Unless something better comes along or some terrible experience happens in the future, which I highly doubt, we're probably going to shoot this at birds for the rest of the
I was impressed, too. I mean, we're pulling pellets out of these birds, and the terminal performance, they seem to deform. They seem to do quite a bit of damage. I mean, it's kind of like well, once again, it was like what I used to see with lead, because lead would hit and deform. It was soft, but it would still penetrate and take a bird down. You know, it was
right. And I will comment.
I saw similar terminal effects with this coated bismuth, the copper plated bismuth. Seems to be that the copper plating is really thin, and on target it seems to deform just slightly,
right?
Which is a good thing. But and meanwhile, the pattern density and everything seems to be there. It works really well.
Right. So, and I will comment too before we get into the numbers and why this stuff's stacking more than comparably, over the top compared to steel. But when I'm not centering birds, like when you make a poorer shot, but you still connect with the bird, you land a couple pellets in the breast, maybe one in the guts. With steel, that's usually a bird flying away, or that's a bird that's going to be very, very lively on the water. And you're going to either swat, or the second you go to pick it up, all of a sudden it's alive, and it's, banjos start playing, and you're running through the swamp or the marsh or the lake trying to pick this damn thing up, and it's just comical, right? But you feel terrible because this bird's suffering. It's hurting.
You don't want to wound a bird.
Yep.
Leave him in the sky or kill him. I don't want anything in between.
Right. So what I noticed and you did have a bird that came in close you were trying to kill, and it turned into that kind of comical event with us. But
right, well, that was because I was once again, he was so close that I knew that if I centered the pattern, I was going to destroy the bird.
And probably before that bird,
the edge of the pattern.
Right, and before you hit that, before we put a swatting shot on that bird, to try and slow him down as he was trying to flop his way through the swamp. I will comment that even though you probably only put 4, maybe of 1 or 2 more or less pellets in him, nothing that went into the vitals, obviously, he wouldn't get off the water. And that's been my experience too, is that you're hitting these birds, even with a wounding shot, so hard, they can't get up. They're struggling. Like, you get over there and they're having a hard time trying to get away from you. It's making you capable of that retreat.
And they're giving you an opportunity to finish.
Right. So, and that's part of that terminal performance. So it's just something you don't see at all with steel. And unless, of course, you break the wing, but even then, I've broken wings and had geese run halfway across the cornfield before I got close enough to, swat them, or grab them by the neck and ring them. But, that all comes down to really all, the perfect storm of factors. So to go through it real quick, when we talk about, why is this shell and this shot type so much more effective than steel, which is overall more cost effective. You get higher round counts per case. You get 50 more per case than Boss Bismuth, where you get 200, and sometimes can be as little as 40 cents a round. Why pick Bismuth? Well, first thing we talk about is density, and then the next is aerodynamics, and third is malleability. And this is your secret sauce as to why this stuff makes sense. And Dad, feel free to jump in at any point that you want to add something. But steel, you've got a density of 7.8 grams per cubic centimeter. You've got no malleability. Your aerodynamics, because of your lower pellet size, is not as good, because in order to have that weight for that terminal energy, you've got to increase pellet size. The larger the shot size, naturally, the more surface area you have, and you're going to create greater drag and slow down faster.
The faster it slows down.
Yep. So now with bismuth, we've got an important thing to designate here is that old bismuth wasn't a very high tin content. Back in when Kent started producing really good bismuth shells, granted they're not copper plated, and they still aren't, even with their newest stuff, which is supposed to be good. And I'm sure it is to a degree. I don't think it's as good as Boss. It's also more expensive. Side note there. But we're looking at, with bismuth, copper-plated bismuth from Boss, you're looking at about 6% tin content, which takes away a lot of that brittleness of that material of bismuth and gives it more malleability. So now we're looking at, pure bismuth is like a 9.75 grams per cubic centimeter. So we're going to say with a 6% tin, we're just going to call it an even 9.6, when really it's probably more around like 9.62 to 9.65 grams per cubic centimeter. 9.6 is close enough. We'll just call it like that. So we've got very lead-like malleability before our copper plating, but we're still slightly brittle, just slightly. It still has the potential to fracture on bone, which can be good.
Which enables it to deform, I mean, because it's actually cracking inside of that real thin copper plating and enables it to deform.
Right. So now we've had the copper plating, right, like you're mentioning. So now we've got this, think of it like a hacky sack. It's hard until it hits something. So we've shot this hacky sack, and the second it hits organic material, fleshy stuff, it's not blowing apart because that casing around it is keeping it together. It's a very malleable, flexible material at that high velocity and impact. And now, so let's say, the bean bags inside, the little pellets are they've shattered, but it's smushing now. So now it's increasing its surface area in its terminal direction. It's tumbling. It's losing energy. So it's still maintaining a moderate amount of penetration, but it's leaving that energy in the bird, unlike steel, which can't deform. It's stuck where it is. And I will take an aside here and say, if you find a steel pellet in your bird, and you say, well, this deformed, and you find like 4 or 5 sides of it have a little flat to it, especially with BB shot, I will say. It's much more easy to see on a 177 pellet than anything else. That's not from hitting the bird. That's from it being slammed into all the other pellets in that charge when you shot the gun.
Yeah, and that's forced through the choke sometimes.
Yeah, so think about how
bridging.
Terrible that is for your gun. It's like, okay, you take a steel, which is really an iron, a soft iron pellet. You put it between a pair of vice grips. Think about how much force it takes to get that thing to deform. Now think about, 100 plus of those inside the bore traveling at 1,500 feet per second. That is a lot of pressure and tension on that barrel and on that choke. So with old guns, it's just not something you really want to put them through. Lighter chokes, overboard.
I use steel with older guns, and I shouldn't have.
Right, and I have too with good effect, but I've used smaller pellets and I've used more open choked guns, and it's worked. Yeah. Or I've used guns that there's a spare barrel for, or that we don't care about that much, right? Which still isn't a good excuse, but we've done it out of necessity and not so much out of just because we want to. And so now, okay, so steel's not good for old guns. Great. So now we got to shoot the new stuff. So you've got to buy a new duck gun. We've got to put a lot of shot in a large space because it's not dense enough. We got to use bigger pellets because it's not heavy enough with the smaller pellets, which means it's less aerodynamic. So we're losing
all of that velocity and weight increases were all motivated by people saying, you know what, it's just not working great. So it was, trying to cure the problem with more of the same was, the effectiveness of it was limited for the steel shot. There's only, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear.
Right. So, it's only going to get so good. It can only be so effective.
Right.
Now, there's
a physical limitation there with the steel. It's just not going to reach lead. And this bismuth is not lead, but in a lot of respects, it's a hell of a lot closer than the steel is.
Right. So, I had somebody ask a question on one of the videos too. He was saying, and I had somebody else ask this on Facebook too. They were saying that they just couldn't quite understand how something like, so they're same shot size, same shot weight, 1.25 ounces, one size bigger on steel, so a 140 or a number 3 pellet, whereas with bismuth would be a number 4 and a .130. They're saying, okay, so the steel's starting out 1,500 feet per second. The bismuth says it's starting out at 1,350. One pellet of the steel equals 2.81 grams. One pellet of the bismuth, without the copper plating considered, is 2.81 grams. So same weight, barely any bigger on the steel. Our pellet counts are almost identical, 190 to 194 pellets on average for an 1.25 ounces. Energy at 40 yards, and this is where we can go down the rabbit hole. With a steel pellet, at 40 yards, number 3 shot, starting out 1,500, we're going to average around 2.4 foot-pounds of energy. All right? That sounds pellet, yeah. Per pellet. That sounds pretty good, right? That sounds pretty good. Bismuth, 3.25 foot-pounds of energy. Okay,
which is a percentage increase of what?
Well, that's right around 20%, 25% increase in energy. So if we strike the bird with the same amount of energy, yeah, it's still the same percentage. But now if we say 10 pellets, instead of hitting them with 24 foot-pounds of energy, we've hit them with 32.5.
Right.
That's an exponential amount of energy dumped.
And not only that, but because even that's got better penetrative effects on target also.
Yeah.
It's
right. So we had another technical difficulty there, Dad. We were talking about here getting the energy on target, and you were commenting on, okay, so we've got like 25% more energy on target. So what was it you were going to add to that?
Well, and more effect on target, better penetrative, properties. It seems it'll dig in. It's digging in, and some of the pellets are deforming, and they're dumping that energy effectively in the bird. They're not, through and through and wasting the energy. They'll stay in the bird, penetrate into the vitals, and do quite a bit of damage. And like I say, it's not the equivalent of lead by any means, but it's as close as you can get with non-toxics that I've found.
Right. So, and another thing to note, people might be asking themselves, well, how did he get those numbers? Why is if they're the same weight, why is the energy for the steel so much lower at 40 yards than the bismuth? And the answer is it's the density and the aerodynamics of the pellet. The larger, less dense pellet is going to slow down faster. Steel, people, we started at 1,500 feet per second. At 40 yards, that steel pellet's not going too fast. That you got to think about.
All of a sudden, the bismuth is faster than steel out at that range.
Right, and you got to understand it. From the muzzle to 20 yards, steel loses 150 to 200 foot per second. So if we're starting out at 1,500, at 20 yards, we're only looking at 1,350, 1,300, whereas the bismuth is, it's going about 1,210, 1,220. And now all of a sudden, when we push to 30 yards, now the bismuth is going 1,150, 1,100, whereas the steel's doing 1,000 to 1,050 or 1,100. So now they're starting to match up.
It's totally flipped. All of a sudden, advantage bismuth.
Right. So, I guess the last thing.
And I think that, once again, I think it just, for whatever reasons, in my gun, in your gun, seems to throw a better pattern.
Right. And that's a lot to do with the malleability as well. It's not stressing the gun. And also, even with lead loads, you take a look at a 1,450 foot per second pheasant load and a 1,220 foot per second. Let's say they're both 1.25 ounces, both number 6s. Recoil aside, it's going to beat the hell out of you.
The faster you're driving a charge of pellets through a choke, the more protuberance you have. It's disturbing that pattern by slamming into that choke that fast. Right. I think it gets to the point where you're blowing the pattern because of that. The easier you push something, the less you're going to disturb it.
Yep.
So
and now
it does what it has to do, and it gets there with a nice pattern.
And here's the thing, too. You take a look at it, and, let's say like Kent, they've got bismuth. It's not copper-plated, but they've got bismuth. And you take a look, okay, what are they shoving their 2 3/4 inch 1.25 ounce at? About 1,450. What's their 3-inch doing? 1,450. It might be 1,500. They've got a 3.5 inch load of 1.5 ounces. And they're shoving that down the pipe at 1,450, 1,500. Okay, so
just overdriving it a little bit and suffering a little bit of pattern problems.
And here's something I'll tell you too. Boss kind of refuses to make a 3.5 inch load because it's not necessary. They put 1.5 ounces in a 3-inch shell. They put 1.25 ounces in a 2 3/4 inch shell. There's no need for the 3.5. You've got all the pellet charge you need in those two shells, and guess what? They're both doing 1,350. Brandon Surecki at Boss and his team have they had made the 1450 foot per second loads before they copper plated and after. And they stopped making them, and they will make them if enough people demand them, but they stopped making them because out of the guns they had, and they were testing, and they'll tell you, if you listen to the podcast with him, he was saying the patterns were not as good. We found a factory full choke with our copper plated at 1350 start was the best. And he also is not selling you, a barrel of fish with that 1350. In ambient temperature, they're getting greater than 1350. They're just saying this is what we feel comfortable with, telling you it's doing.
You get a similar thing with a rifle. Any given load, any given bullet has a certain velocity that it does best at, right? That you're going to squeeze the most accuracy out of it. And it's not usually the maximum load. It's usually somewhere back of that. If you shoot a rifle for accuracy, and you get into it deep enough, you're going to know that, just driving it as hard as you can is not the most accurate way to do things. And I think with a shotgun, there's a similar effect. Your pattern is going to be optimized at a given velocity. And really, it's about pattern. You've got to put the pellets on the bird.
Right. And you got to put enough pellets in the bird to cause a terminal effect that's going to dispatch it effectively.
Right. So your best a really good pattern, a little bit slower, will have more effect than driving it just as fast as you possibly can, but not hitting it with as many pellets. Shell, they've seemed to have hit an excellent recipe, I guess you would call it. It's just, like I said, it's good stuff.
And
maybe it's a little more expensive, but if you're not a guy that is a waterfowler that goes out there and commonly shoots 4 cases of this, 4 cases of shotgun shells a year, then you're probably want to.
Are we maybe shooting?
Throw a few more coins at the few shots that you do use, and be more effective.
Right. Well, maybe the guys are shooting 1,000 rounds, 4 cases of ammo a year. You think they might be doing it because of what they're using?
Well, they might live in a better waterfowling situation than I do, and they do have that amount of opportunity. Or maybe they're compensated. I don't know.
Are they
feel it's necessary to shoot 1,000 rounds, or you find yourself shooting that many? I can understand where economy might be a factor.
Right. I could buy 1,000 rounds of Winchester Super X ounce and a quarter 3s right now, or 2s for, it's the middle of the season. I could get them on sale I could buy 1,000 rounds for, let's see, probably around $400.
Right.
Or less, maybe $350.
If you're a high volume shooter and you're in a situation where that's, you're out in the Midwest shooting snows and you're just gonna, burn through a lot of shells, then maybe economy is the way to go. But if your days in the field are less numerous, the little bit of extra money you spend on these Boss shells is worth it for the number of birds that you're going to get that you wouldn't have.
So I would say my opinion pretty much lines up with that in saying that, I think it's a perfect investment for the guys that don't shoot as much. I think it's a perfect investment for the guys that shoot quite a bit. If you're a really good shot, and you find yourself, I would say a good shot on waterfowl, you can consider yourself a pretty decent shot if you're shooting 40%, 45% or higher. I think you're doing pretty well, especially if you're a dude who doesn't go out and shoot skeet or sporting clays all summer.
Right.
I think that
world
that
champion
$120
skeet shooter.
Yeah, I think that $120 a shot, which is what Boss costs you in a case. Granted, it's shipped free to your door, but it's 200 rounds in a case. It's going to run you about $240. So it's $120 a shot. You're granted, you get this cool little money stack with every case, so that's kind of neat. They sell those individually for $30, so I don't know if that's a value or just a freebie they're giving you. That's up to you to decide. I like it a lot. That's a different topic of discussion, but
I think that you're going to see a gain in effectiveness once you get used to these things. You're going to like the way the how soft they shoot. They're a pleasure to shoot.
Yeah. Well, and you know, you don't. I've killed geese with one. I've killed a goose with the 2 3/4 inch, and I've killed geese with the 3-inch.
I haven't had an opportunity yet.
And I was colored impressed. I mean, granted, the one goose I shot was. Here's the thing. I shot it close at about 15 to 16 yards, and it wasn't centered in the pattern. I rushed the shot, and I hit it with the bottom of the pattern. And then my next 2 shots, actually 3 shots, because I was able to load one more and shoot it, the flock flying away, I completely airballed them all. So that's not the shell. That's me being just a bad shot. But the one that I hit
with those days.
With like 10 pellets, it hit her so hard. And I'm used to, you know, I've dumped geese with steel at 10 yards out to 50 and 60 yards. And I've had everything from a goose that was dead before it hit the ground to a goose that hit the ground and popped up running. Like its feet were going the second it touched down. It just take off. I mean, and granted, you know, that shot with steel at like 10 or 15 yards wasn't very good, but I still put pellets hard into it. When a bird, you know, when you hit a goose and down flies everywhere, you got it. And especially if you break a wing. And I've just had shitty experience with steel, to put it bluntly. And this stuff, even when you connect and it's not that great a shot, it's consistently putting these birds down, either killing them or making them so hurt they can't really get up. And, you know, we're not trying to, I don't want people to think that like we're on the gravy train for Boss, or that we're just so hyped about a product we're going to say whatever it takes to get more people to shoot it.
I didn't know anything about them until you brought them to me, and I tried them. And just giving you my opinion of them.
Right. And I would say, too, you know, if you want to hear our honest review or 10-second review of other shot loads, especially steel, and you're saying, you know what, Federal Black Cloud works pretty good. Dad and I have used heavy steel, nitro steel. 1450 to 1500 feet per second of 2s and 3s is a pretty good sauce for most guys.
It'll put birds down, no doubt about it. Put a lot of birds down.
And it'll do it cost effective too, at $89 to $120 a case of 250.
Right.
So
that's cheap.
That's cheap. That's great. It's fantastic. If you're shooting birds at 25 yards and less, and you do a lot of it, the value might not be there. But if you're the kind of hunter that you don't know how many rounds you're going to shoot, you don't know what the distance is going to be day to day, morning to morning, minute to minute, you have no clue what the birds are going to set up for each day is a different day. You know, even if you're an outfitter, if you're buying this stuff by thousands of rounds and you're getting better economy out of it, and you just want your clients to see better results, I mean, those two situations, I say Boss is worth it.
Your opportunities are numerous. I mean, like I said, I guess I'm kind of old school. I like to make things count. It's not a matter of money, such as it is just a philosophy, you know, a code.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you have a similar idea, then I think it's better than the steel.
Right. And I even argue if you're a high enough volume shooter, you'll be able to buy it. You know, like I said, an outfitter will probably be able to get Boss for a low enough price, buying 5,000 rounds at a time, that it makes sense for their clients. I think as an average guy, Boss makes sense for you, because most guys aren't going to go through more than 100 to 150 shots a season, let alone 200. So a case a year, it's $240. I think that's doable. It is for me at least. And it's not like I'm rolling in cash all the time. So I think
you're not right now. You're not in Nebraska. You're not living in a high volume situation where the birds are everywhere. You know, like we've always had birds around here, but they're not that numerous. You felt like, you know, you're gonna decoy, I don't know, maybe 3-4 groups of birds in.
Right.
So you want to make those shots count. You're not, you know, there's certain places where you're just, it's a different situation, you know, it's all situational, I guess.
Yep, it absolutely is. And I'd say for a lot of guys, this stuff will make sense. But once again, you know, if you want to hear our 10-second review on bad stuff, Winchester Super X, especially the expert stuff, the ounce and the eighth, I wouldn't buy it. Federal Black Cloud, I think it's good, but it's too expensive. Heavy steel is pretty decent. I wouldn't shoot heavy metal or heavy X or anything. It doesn't have the value and it doesn't perform well enough. Rio Blue Steel, actually pretty decent. Only 1,400 foot per second with the 3-inch shells, but does a really good job in my experience. Put a lot of snows and a lot of mallards on the ground with it.
See, it's funny because you're 25 and I'm 55. You've probably got more experience with birds, and because you were out in Nebraska with all that, that rich environment for waterfowling, you were able to do more shooting, more comparative shooting with different loads and all that than I have been able to. I just don't get out that often, and my opportunities are not that abundant.
Right. I'm also the dude who tries to tinker with literally everything.
I mean, my opinion only counts because I remember what lead used to do. That's about the only reason that you would listen to me.
Right. So I can't stop tinkering with shit, and you used to shoot lead, so that's our validity with this argument here. We're saying that this stuff works because an old-timer, I guess you're an old-timer now, Dad. Sorry about it.
No, that's all right. Guilty as charged.
But, Dad knows shooting lead. I know spending the better part of 10, 13 years now shooting steel. And
being out in Nebraska.
And being out in Nebraska, growing up in upstate New York, where, again, we had our local birds, and then you had your week or two during the year that would, the migration was on. And, for me, I'd be damned. It could be the middle of deer season, but the hell with it. I'm going down back in the honey hole, and I'm going to kill me a couple greenheads.
There's a migration that doesn't last. Sometimes it didn't last a week.
Right. It could be 3 days.
Sometimes, it would turn cold, and the birds were out of here.
Yep. I remember days growing up in high school that, hell, I didn't go to swim practice, and I should have. I played sick because I went down back after school and went, to hell with it. I got to kill some birds. And, Dad or Mom comes home and
they're only going to be here just a few days.
I'm sitting there with a strap full of black duck and wood ducks and just looking at them like, birds? Mom wasn't too happy about that. I don't think you had too much of a problem with it. I guess it was a break from my swim career. But yeah, but it's for me it's always been an obsession and a passion. So it's just it's kind of what my other ego revolves around. You're always been kind of a big game hunter, and I've always kind of been a duck guy now, especially after moving out to Nebraska for a time. But long story short, I think we both have concluded it's worth it. It does its job, and we'll probably be shooting it long into the future as long as Boss keeps making it. And the success they're having, I think they will.
Since you brought up the old-timer thing, let me throw out a shout-out to the old-timers. This stuff is soft shooting. Which,
right.
If your shoulders hurt, there's a thing, okay?
Yeah.
So if you're an old timer maybe out there, or an old timer that you see him wincing when he's in the duck blind from shooting, you might want to recommend some of this stuff
right.
to him.
And I will add,
a lot softer shooting.
I will add, it's not just 12 gauge. They also make 20, 28, 16, and 410. So it doesn't matter what bore you've got, there's a Boss shell for you. So if you want to get that sweet 16 out, or you got a younger person who wants to shoot a 20. They've got all the 2 3/4 inch for the 20, the 3 inch for the 20. They've got 2 3/4 ounce for the 16, which is a perfect load, perfectly square load. And they've got
get some of those old bird guns out there.
Oh yeah, could you imagine getting an old Lefevre 28 gauge double out that hasn't shot for 45 years? That's just. I hope I get the chance someday. But guys, we could ramble on for ages about this, and we kind of had. Of course, I'll edit it down for consumption purposes, so you guys can process all of our nonsense in little bite-sized pieces. But I want to thank Dad again today for joining us for the first episode of Bad Company Podcast. It'll be posted here on YouTube, as well as other mediums, and maybe eventually the iTunes or podcast medium as well. Big shout out to Boss. Thanks for making a great shell. Again, we don't get any kickbacks from them. We're just kind of reviewing an awesome product, and maybe we'll bring you more.
Satisfied customers.
Yep. Super satisfied. Super satisfied. And we hope you all give it a try and let us know in the comments. what you like, you can always reach out to us at AmericanArmsChannel at gmail.com. Again, that's AmericanArmsChannel at gmail.com. That is our little bit of a helpline and question email. If you're an industry contact and you'd like to contact us about reviewing a product and giving honest opinions, not just paid spokesmanship, you can reach us at that email as well. So as always, guys, God bless. Keep your powder dry. Again, thanks to Dad. Any final words?
Stay safe out there, guys.
All right. See you guys.